On the 24th of February, 2021, YouTuber Mix Morris released a video on his channel titled, "I Turned SpongeBob into a First-Person Shooter," following up on his previous video of him turning Super Mario 64 into the same genre. Like its predecessor, SpongeGlock SquarePants, or SGSP, had been picked up by speedrunners almost immediately. This is the story of the speedrunners who pushed SpongeGlock to its limits. This is the story of SGSP 100%. Now, as per usual with these kind of videos, tracking down the first ever runs and putting them in order is not the easiest task. But we know that on the day of release, the 24th of February, GameStable posted a quick video of him completing the game in 4 minutes and 36 seconds. Let's look at how he did it. Let's talk about the game's categories. In the 100% category, you must complete every task in the game, all of which are given to you by Mr. Krabs. So first, to get those missions, GameStable runs over to the Krab himself. After getting the tasks, we then see him save and quit, which warps him back to SpongeBob's house. This saves him a second over having to walk all the way to his first target, Squidward. After an uncomfortable 40-second cutscene, he runs to Patrick and snaps his neck. He then stood on a ledge here and shot Larry and his goons. GameStable next ran to Shady Shoals, killed the pensioners, and returned to Mr. Krabs to get yet another objective. He then killed Sandy and ran all the way to downtown. There, he shot all 10 citizens and robbed the bank. He then left and ran all the way back to Mr. Krabs, killing Mr. Krabs in his final form and ending the run as soon as Krabs' health bar hit 0. This Krabs fight is pretty on rails, so there wasn't much opportunity to lose time. This got GameStable to time of 4:36. Of course, there was room for improvement. The next day, a runner by the name of the Mighty Jar set another world record with a time of 4:23. This run was a step forward, but it also represented a few steps back. While GameStable would strafe run through the level to save a bit of time, the Mighty Jar simply held W and slowly ran to his target. However, he still saved a ton of time by simply aiming better, mostly in the Larry section and in the downtown section, where you have to kill 10 citizens. It is important we note an occurrence in this run. The Mighty Jar is seen spawning in front of SpongeBob's house when he finishes the Squidward cutscene, and when he leaves the bank. This is a bug, called the wrong warp, which is yet not understood. Getting it optimally is pure luck, and runners can only hope they get it in the correct places and not in the wrong ones. This is what really saved the Mighty Jar so much time, despite his lack of strafing, getting him that time of 4:23. It is worth noting that this run would later be deemed invalid due to a glitch we haven't discussed yet, but don't worry, we'll talk about it later. So, with the game only being out for a week, there wasn't yet a speedrun.com page for runners to post their runs. Early runners gathered around an unofficial Discord and a Google Sheets leaderboard, but admittedly, these didn't really catch on. So, if you search SpongeGlock SquarePants World Record on YouTube, you'll see lots of people claiming to get world record because, well, they didn't know any better. Without a speedrun.com leaderboard, they simply couldn't find a faster time and just assumed the world record was theirs. It's ironic, then, that the actual next world record we'll discuss wasn't even labeled as such. On February 26th, only a day after the Mighty Jar's run, a YouTuber named Dr. Beans uploaded their run of 3:57. This run was surprisingly optimized given how soon it was after the game's release. On top of having good aim, Dr. Beans reincorporated strafe running into the route. They got the same wrong warp as the Mighty Jar from the bank back to SpongeBob's house, and comfortably cemented their place as the true world record holder at the time. Then, a few days later, Dr. Beans uploaded another run. Their route was nearly the same, but they generally took quicker lines from location to location. They also shot the goons on the beach from further away, allowing them to stay more en route. There was one big discovery in both of Dr. Bean's runs that we haven't talked about yet. It turns out, bullets pass straight through collision in the world, meaning Dr. Beans could shoot Sandy right through the wall and not waste time having to open her doors. With all of these time saves, Dr. Beans was able to achieve a world record of just barely 3:48. Then, about a week later, a new world record was set by MaxSafe2. His time, a 3:43. There wasn't anything revolutionary in Max's run. He just had incredibly good gameplay and took much faster lines than the previous world record. Once again, he optimized the kills for Larry and his goons by shooting them from even further away. Sure, it was risky, but it was a nice little time save. His downtown section was also top-notch, with great aiming and shooting. However, Max did not get the wrong warp from the bank, causing him to lose significant time. The rest of the run was just so good that he still got world record. To be fair, Max probably didn't even know about the wrong warp, since its consistency varies so much from PC to PC. In retrospect, we know time save is possible, and that time save would be achieved by Swagawana. Swag took more or less the same route as Max, but his aim and his lines just weren't as optimized. However, he did manage to get that legendary wrong warp from the bank to SpongeBob's house, meaning a big enough time save to snag a world record of 3:41. And after Swag's run in the middle of March, SGSP started to die down. It seemed as if the game's speedrun had been more or less bled dry, and Mix Morris's video wasn't really popping into people's recommendations anymore. No one could come close to beating Swag's 3:41, and the game faded to irrelevancy. That was, until the game sprang back to life on the 1st of June. That fateful June day, a new SGSP speedrunning Discord was created. This Discord ended up being the centralized hub for everything SGSP. Swag quickly heard about the Discord and decided to submit his run to speedrun.com, shocking all the other runners with what seemed like a legendary run. It really seemed like the game couldn't be improved much, other than maybe cleaning up the aiming and the lines from Swag's run. But little did we know, the game still had a few more big time saves. On the 6th of June, a runner by the name of Luma discovered a way to skip the Squidward cutscene while still adhering to the rules of 100%. Although it was generally frowned upon when it was discovered, the community grew to adopt it as the first sequence break allowed in 100%. This sequence break was performed by hitting the interact key, E, 3 extra times during the dialogue with Mr. Krabs. By hitting E, you're able to advance the quest just enough to skip the cutscene, but not enough to skip the quest entirely. This same principle is actually what invalidates the Mighty Jars run I mentioned earlier. He hits E too many times during one of his dialogues with Krabs, and therefore never completes one of the main quests that's necessary for the 100% route. Regardless of the risk of invalidating your run, this 40-second skip was just too huge to leave out. There was another separate issue though. That wrong warp from the bank we see in Swagawana's run was just so inconsistent for all the runners who were trying it. Luckily, the very next day, a runner named Dignity discovered a way to get a slightly slower but 100% consistent version of the wrong warp from the bank. With both of these time saves, Dignity took it upon himself to get the world record, and he started the biggest chain reaction ever seen in SGSP history. Right off the bat, Dignity got a 3:35 with Squidward skip. Considering the skip saved 30 seconds, the community knew they had a lot more work to do. This run was admittedly much worse in terms of movement than Swag's 3:41, but was carried by that Squidward skip. Dignity was beaten minutes later by Luma with a 3:33. Keep in mind, all of the runs around this time had that same awkward movement up until the final boss. But that skip was saving so much time that good runs weren't even required for world record. That same day, Dignity beat Luma's 3:33 with a 3:30 even. A few hours later, Luma got a time of 3:23.8. Dignity was shocked with the big improvement, but still managed to improve his time with a 3:23.5 a while after. In the span of one day, nearly 20 seconds were saved off of Swag's 3:41. But the chain reaction was not over yet. Tomorrow was another day, June the 8th. Not many improvements to the world record were made that day, but Dignity did shave 3 seconds off, getting a time of 3:20. It seemed that we were coming to the limit of what SpongeGlock could offer. Little did we know, the next day would prove the most influential day in SGSP's lifetime. The world record was being improved very quickly by the current community. new runners such as Bob and slightly more seasoned runners like Dignity were competing furiously for the world record. Koba was thought to have come out on top with a 3:09, but both Koba's PBs were unfortunately rejected. Koba had rediscovered the time save that GameStabled had discovered day of release. Remember, by quitting and reloading the game after talking to Krabs, you could potentially save a full second in movement time. However, when you mix the quit and reload with the Squidward cutscene skip, then the game considers the Squidward objective completely skipped. We can see here that the door in Koba's run says open instead of kick down, like it should. Although Koba certainly had the skill to get world record, the runs he performed would not make it onto the official leaderboards that day. This small inconvenience would not stop either runner from continuing to grind. Even without the quit and reload, Dignity managed to bring his time down to an incredible 3:09. All of these world records were the result of cleaning up little mistakes from the previous runs, as there were no new strats getting discovered at this point. One of the important events on the 9th was the SGSP 100% tournament. During the tournament was a best-of-3 race between Dignity and Luma. One of the races ended up being a 3:08 from Dignity during the semi-finals. Dignity seemed on top of the category at this point, having held all 3 world records in every category of the game, until a certain runner streamed runs of the game. This runner was Black Belt Ginger Ninja. Oh hey, that's me. I had heard about the game from Koba, Luma, and another runner named Eris, since the 4 of us were all part of the Mirror's Edge speedrunning community. Always down to participate in a good meme, I streamed a one-off of SGSP, and, after about a half hour, managed to get my own 3:09, barely off of world record. My computer was surprisingly consistent at getting wrong warps, even without Dignity's slower setup, meaning I could get more attempts off the ground than my competitors. That same stream, I left 100% for a bit, and got the any percent world record, which Dignity was soon to reclaim. Now, an hour and a half into my stream, I returned to 100%, and the time I managed to get a few minutes before the stream ended was revolutionary. That was partially thanks to a new skip that Dignity found for me. After a dead 100% attempt that stream, I decided to mess around, and I threw myself into a death trigger by Sandy's house. That's when Dignity, who was in my chat, did some theory crafting, and came up with another wrong warp-related skip. So, for most runners, hitting this death trigger would warp you back to the last place you exited. In this case, that would be Shady Shoals. However, for me, I was actually getting warped to SpongeBob's house, same as you would during the bank wrong warp. If I did this at the correct time in the route, this would save me from having to walk from Sandy's Dome to SpongeBob's house. It was a bit unfortunate that we had to incorporate another, more or less random wrong warp into the route, but these few seconds of time save were just too alluring. There were other, smaller time saves as well. Managing gun reloads was probably the biggest one. In this game, SpongeBob can only reload once you've completely ran out of bullets. To save time, it sometimes makes sense to waste the rest of your clip, so you can go into the next area with all 6 of your bullets. By better managing the reloads, and incorporating other tiny movement optimizations, I was the first to break the 3-minute barrier, getting a time that night of 2:57. So I ended the stream pretty happy with myself. After the stream, I played around a little bit more, and I found one more time save. Turns out when loading from one area to another, I found you could still move around and shoot. So, by starting the level transition early, and killing citizens during the 1-second fade, I was able to save just a bit more time on each loading transition. I decided to grind for an hour or 2 offline that same day to incorporate the new time save I found, getting me a final time for the night of 2:55. In a single day, the world record was dropped from a 3:20 to a 2:55, an unbelievable 25-second improvement. At this point, I think it's fair to say that runs were no longer just being carried by Squidward Skip. Really, the run was more optimized than it had ever been. So, for the first time since the Discord was created, the world record managed to stand for a few days. Finally, on June 13th, Eris uploaded her own well-deserved PB of 2:54. Eris was another runner who, like me, could get the fast and inconsistent version of the wrong warp that runners like Dignity struggled with. Along with incorporating fast wrong warps back into her route, Eris took advantage of the game's wonky collision to speed up the Larry section with a clean wallbang. This gave her just enough time save to snag the world record. But I wasn't going to let that stand. Despite my proclamation that SpongeGlock would be a one-time stream, I continued to grind for another hour and a half that afternoon on the 13th. I incorporated little time saves here and there. For example, while shooting Larry's goons, I was already holding S to move toward Shady Shoals. Or, during the downtown section, I chose my targets very carefully to avoid straying too far from the bank, where the next objective was. Eventually, the luck of the wrong warps was on my side. I managed to get a 252, and eventually, that same stream, I broke past the 250-second barrier and managed to secure a 249. That is where the world record stands to this day. My run is not perfect. On top of my lines being sloppy, I actually missed a shot in the bank, probably costing me a half second. This run will not stand forever. That we can be sure of. But who will be the next world record holder? If someone beats me, will I come back to reclaim my title? That's the beauty of speedrunning. We'll just have to wait and see. This has been the world record progression of SpongeGlock SquarePants 100%. Thank you for watching.